Welcome. In today's video, we're going to look at the basics of graphing. First, let's review the Cartesian coordinate system. We have a horizontal axis and a vertical axis. The horizontal axis is the x-axis, and the vertical axis is our y-axis. These two axes intersect at the point 0, 0, and it's named the origin. And these two axes form four quadrants. Our first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, and fourth quadrant. You might have used the trick of forming a C or drawing a C starting with the top right, ending with the bottom right to remember how we number our quadrants. Let's first look at an example where we just determine the quadrant or the axis in which a point is located. This is going to help us in setting up graphs. If we know what ordered pairs we're trying to plot, we can set up our axes so that we have space to graph them. 3, -2, what quadrant will that lie in? Well, 3 is going to move to the right, -2 is going to move down, so this is our fourth quadrant. 0, 3. If we go 0 to the left or to the right and then 3 up, this is going to be the positive y-axis. -4, 1 will move to the left because of the -4, up because of +1. So this is going to be our second quadrant. -1, 0 is just one unit to the left, which is our negative x-axis. -5 halves, -3. So here we're seeing an ordered pair that includes fractions, and that's okay. The negative still indicates that we'll move to the left, and then the -3 indicates we'll move down. So this is our third quadrant. 4.5, 3.5, both x and y are positive. This is our first quadrant. Determine if the following points are solutions to the equation 2x plus y equals -6. To determine whether or not an ordered pair is a solution, we're going to plug in our values for x and y and see if the equation is still true. So we're going to plug in 0 for x, -6 for y. Simplifying the left and the right-hand side, we should have an equality. So 2 times 0 is 0, plus -6 is -6, which equals -6. This point is a solution to the equation. We'll do the same thing for the ordered pair 1, 4. 2 times 1 plus 4 equals -6. When I simplify the left-hand side, I get +6. Which is not equal to -6, so this is not a solution to the equation given. -4, -1, substituting -1 in for x, and -4 for y. If I simplify, we have -2 plus a -4 is -6, which equals -6. Since this is true, that is a solution to the equation 2x plus y equals -6. If an ordered pair is a solution to the equation, that means that ordered pair will be on the graph of that equation. Our first technique that we learn for graphing is by plotting points. This is the technique where we construct a table of values or x, y, t table, whatever you guys have named it in the past. So we're going to practice that using the graph x minus y, or the equation x minus y equals 8. We're going to pick just a default set of x values, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Now, when I look at this equation, if I have my values of x, I'm going to plug them in here for x. But if you see, every time we plug in a value of x, we're still going to have to move some terms around. We're going to have to solve for y in order to determine the value of y. So before we actually plug in numbers for x, we're going to take our equation and solve for y. So we're going to start by subtracting x on both sides. -y equals -x plus 8. Divide everything by -1. We get y is equal to -x divided by -1 is +x, and +8 divided by -1 is -8. So now we have an equation where y is isolated. It's going to be easier to solve for y when it's all by itself. So now we take our values of x, we plug them in. -2 minus 8 is equal to -10. When I plug in x equals -1, -1 minus 8 is -9. 0 minus 8 is -8. 1 minus 8, -7. 2 minus 8, -6. And this generates the 5 ordered pairs we will use to graph this equation. -2, -10, that's 2 units to the left and then 10 units down. So I will go down here. -1, -9, we will go left 1, down 9. 0, -8, we're not moving to the left or the right at all, but we're going to go down 8 units. 1, -7, and 2, -6. Those are the 5 points, and we will connect those with as straight of a line as possible. And that is graphing the equation by plotting points. Now, many of us are familiar with other ways to graph an equation like this one, and that's wonderful. We will use those and we'll talk about them in other videos. But for right now, we just want to review that fundamental skill of making a table of values and using that to plot points. Let's try another equation. Y equals the absolute value of x plus 2. Again, we'll make our table of values, and we'll just pick those default x values. If you choose to pick other values, that's fine, but you may not get as good of a picture. You might even find that you have to pick different x values in order to get a good picture. But for right now, we'll just stick with these 5. When I plug in -2, we have the absolute value of -2 plus 2. Remember that absolute value is measuring the distance a number is from 0. So -2 is 2 units from 0. So 2 plus 2 is 4. The absolute value of -1 plus 2, that's the same as 1 plus 2, which is 3. The absolute value of 0 plus 2, absolute value of 0 is 0 plus 2 is 2. Absolute value of 1 plus 2 is going to be 3. Absolute value of 2 plus 2 is also going to be 4. Again, now that we've completed our table of values, this has generated 5 ordered pairs that we can graph. -2, 4. -1, 3. 0, 2. 1, 3. 2, 4. And we see when we connect those points that we end up with a graph that looks like a V. Let's try one more. Y equals 2x squared. When I plug in -2, make sure we use parentheses here. We have 2 times -2 squared. We have to follow our order of operations when we're simplifying this. The first thing we want to do is that exponent, which is only on the -2. So we have -2 squared. We can evaluate that in our head by thinking -2 times -2. That's +4. +4 times 2 is 8. -1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. Zero squared is 0 times 2 is 0. 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4 times 2. Again, we see that repeated value of 8. And now we'll plot these ordered pairs. -2, 8. -1, 2. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 8. And when I connect these points, we're not going to be able to connect them with a V. It is actually a curved graph. If you recall from another class, this is called a parabola. And we'll learn a lot about parabolas in the coming chapters. Again, just to recap, when we're graphing, that fundamental tool that we have is that table of values. As we learn new graphing techniques, it will replace the use of the table of values, but don't ever forget that that's always an option. If you're ever looking at an equation or a function and you're unsure of how to use the graphing techniques that we've seen, go back to making a table of values.